Welcome, dear listener, to another gentle journey through the shadows of history. Tonight, we invite you to settle back, perhaps pull a soft blanket closer, and allow your mind to drift into the paper-thin walls and carefully measured footsteps of Edo, Japan. You are safe here in your comfortable present, wrapped in the certainty of choice and abundance, as we explore a time when every grain of rice was counted and every bow had precise meaning. The world we visit tonight is not one of clashing swords and dramatic battles, but of ink-stained fingers, careful posture, and the quiet dignity found in small, methodical rituals. If you want to help me to keep doing these videos, please consider subscribing to the channel and hit the like button. It motivates and helps me keep bringing videos in this format. If you'd like to hear about a specific topic, leave a comment below. I'll show you in the video when your topic is chosen. The first light of dawn creeps across the wooden shutters of our samurai's modest dwelling, filtering through the paper screens in soft, golden lines that dance across tatami mats worn smooth by years of careful footsteps. In this quiet moment, before the city awakens, he performs the same ritual that has marked the beginning of every day for the past 15 years of his service to the Tokugawa administration. The air carries the faint scent of cherry blossoms from a neighbor's tree, mixed with the earthy smell of morning dew on wooden walls and the distant aroma of rice cooking in countless household hearths across the sprawling city. This is not the dramatic awakening of a warrior preparing for battle, but the measured, almost meditative beginning of another day spent in service to an empire built on paper, its protocol, and the careful management of human ambition. Our samurai kneels beside his sleeping mat, his movements deliberate and controlled as he folds the thin futon with the same precision his grandfather once reserved for maintaining battle gear. Each fold must be perfect, each crease sharp and clean, because even in the privacy of his own chamber, perfection of form reflects the perfection of spirit that his position demands. His hands, soft from years of holding brushes rather than sword hilts, smooth the silk covering with practiced care. The futon disappears into a wooden chest along with his nightclothes, and the small room transforms from sleeping chamber to living space with an efficiency that would impress any modern minimalist. Yet this efficiency is born not of aesthetic choice, but of necessity, for space in Edo is precious. In every square foot of his modest quarters are served multiple purposes throughout the long day ahead. The morning ablutions begin with the ritual that defines his class and his purpose, the careful arrangement of his body into perfect posture. Standing before a small bronze mirror, polished to a dull gleam by countless mornings of use, he adjusts his stance with the same attention to detail that a master craftsman brings to his finest work. His feet aligned precisely, his shoulders square, spine straight as a sword blade, his chin held at exactly the correct angle to demonstrate neither arrogance nor submission. This posture, drummed into him through years of training, must become as natural as breathing, for it will carry him through every interaction of the day ahead. In a society where a single inappropriate bow can signal weakness, disrespect, or dangerous ambition, the mastery of one's own body becomes a form of survival, a daily performance that must never falter, even when fatigue weighs heavy on his shoulders or worry clouds his thoughts. The ritual of dressing follows patterns established by centuries of tradition, each garment chosen and arranged with careful consideration of the day's duties and the social messages that clothing must convey. His undergarments are clean but practical, made of cotton rather than silk, a reminder of his position in the hierarchy that governs every aspect of life in the shogunate. Over these goes the hakama, the wide-legged trousers that allow for proper seating and bowing while maintaining dignity. Their dark fabric carefully brushed free of any lint or imperfection that might catch the eye of a superior. The Haori jacket follows, its subdued colors and modest family crest, speaking quietly of respectability without ostentation, of service without ambition that might threaten those above him in the complex web of Edo politics. The arrangement of his hair requires particular attention, for it too serves as a constant advertisement of his status, loyalty, and attention to proper form. Using a small wooden comb, he shapes his top knot with the same precision a calligrapher brings to forming characters. Each strand positioned to create the appearance of effortless perfection that actually requires considerable daily effort to maintain. Small amount of camellia oil, precious and carefully rationed, provides the necessary hold without creating the appearance of vanity that would be inappropriate for someone of his station. The final step involves securing the arrangement with a simple wooden pen. Its lack of ornamentation, another careful signal of his place in the hierarchy that governs everything from his morning grooming to his evening meals. With his appearance properly arranged, our samurai turns to the first substantial task of his day, the preparation and consumption of breakfast, a meal that must provide necessary nutrition while remaining within the strict budgetary constraints that define his existence. From a small wooden box, he measures out exactly the amount of rice allotted for the morning meal, counting each grain with the precision of an accountant. For rice is not merely food, but currency, status symbol, and political statement, all wrapped into one. The grains slide into a clay pot with a sound like tiny stones, and he adds water, measured to the exact proportions his mother taught him decades ago, when such lessons seemed like simple household management rather than exercises in economic survival. While the rice cooks over a small charcoal fire, carefully tended to produce the most heat with the least fuel, he prepares the accompanying elements of his breakfast with the same methodical care. A small piece of pickled radish, cut into precise slices, provides the sharp flavor that will awaken his palate for the day ahead. A thin soup made from yesterday's miso paste, stretched with hot water and garnished with a few carefully preserved seaweed fronds, offers warmth and the illusion of abundance. These simple foods, consumed in proper sequence while maintaining perfect posture, even in solitude, represent not poverty, but conscious choice, the deliberate embrace of simplicity that Buddhist teaching and Confucian philosophy both recommend as the path to spiritual clarity and social harmony. The consumption of this modest meal becomes itself a form of meditation, each bite taken with full attention to flavor, texture, and the way nourishment spreads through his body like sunrise spreads across the sky. He eats slowly, partly from philosophical conviction about the importance of mindful consumption, but also from practical necessity, for this small amount of food must sustain him through many hours of demanding work. The rice, perfectly cooked, despite the limitations of his simple cooking arrangement, provides the steady energy his body will need for the long day ahead. The pickled vegetables awaken his senses, while the miso soup soothes his stomach and prepares it, the careful rationing of nutrients that his budget demands throughout the coming hours. As he finishes his breakfast, our samurai performs the ritual cleaning of his eating utensils with the same precision he brings to every other aspect of his morning routine. Each bowl receives careful attention, scrubbed clean with a small brush in precious water that must not be wasted, then dried and stored in their designated places within his carefully organized cupboard. This attention to cleanliness serves multiple purposes. It maintains the health of his household, demonstrates the proper respect for material possessions that his station demands, and creates the foundation for tomorrow morning's ritual, ensuring that each day begins with the same sense of order and preparation that marks a life lived in conscious harmony with social expectations and personal limitations. The morning light has grown stronger now, streaming through the paper windows in broad bands that illuminate the simple beauty of his living space. The tatami mats show the gentle wear of years of use, their edges perfectly aligned and their surface free of any debris that might speak of carelessness or disrespect for his humble domain. A single scroll hangs in the tokonoma alcove, its calligraphy, speaking of perseverance and duty, values that will guide his thoughts throughout the challenging hours ahead. The scroll changes with the seasons, but its message remains constant. In a world of uncertainty and change, the cultivation of inner strength and outer propriety provides the only reliable foundation for a meaningful life. The gentle sound of wooden shutters sliding open marks the true beginning of the working day. As our samurai prepares to leave his private sanctuary and enter the complex world of Edo bureaucracy that will claim his attention until evening falls once again across the sprawling city, he moves to a low wooden desk, its surface polished smooth by years of use, where the tools of his trade await in perfect arrangement. Brushes of varying sizes, each with its specific purpose and proper place. Inkstones that must be prepared with careful attention to consistency and flow. Stacks of paper that represent both opportunity and burden in equal measure. This is the arsenal of the Tokugawa peace, where battles are fought with documents rather than swords, and where victory belongs to those who can navigate the labyrinthine requirements of administrative precision with unwavering attention to detail and unfailing respect for proper form and protocol. The preparation of ink becomes a meditative ritual in itself. The slow grinding of ink, stick against stone, creating a rhythm that settles his mind and prepares his spirit for the demanding mental work ahead. The circular motions of his hand follow patterns learned in childhood, when such preparation seemed like play rather than the foundation for professional survival. Water, added, drop by careful drop, transforms the black powder into liquid possibility. Its consistency, adjusted through years of experience to achieve the perfect balance between flow and control. Too thin, and his characters will lack the bold presence that official documents demand. Too thick, and the brush will skip and stutter, creating imperfections that could be interpreted as carelessness or, worse, disrespect for the important matters entrusted to his care. The scent of fresh ink mingles with the morning air, earthy and rich, a perfume that speaks of scholarly dedication and bureaucratic responsibility. His first task involves reviewing the documents that arrived late yesterday, carefully unrolling scrolls and examining papers with a systematic thoroughness that his position demands. Each document tells a story of the vast administrative machinery that keeps the Tokugawa state functioning. Reports from distant provinces about rice harvests and tax collections, quests for permits to travel between domains, records of births and deaths that must be meticulously maintained for population control and security purposes, and the endless correspondence between various levels of government that ensures every decision, no matter how minor, receives proper consideration and approval from appropriate authorities. The language of these documents follows ancient patterns. It's formal and circumlocutory. It's designed to show respect and minimize the possibility of misunderstanding or offense that might disrupt the careful harmony upon which the entire system depends. As he reads, our samurai makes careful notes in the margins, using a brush so fine it can create characters no larger than a grain of rice. These annotations serve multiple purposes. They demonstrate his careful attention to each document's contents, provide reference points for the responses he must draft, and create a record of his own involvement that may prove valuable if questions arise about proper procedures or administrative decisions. His handwriting, cultivated through decades of practice, reflects his character and competence as surely as his posture reflects his social position. Each stroke must be precise, each character perfectly formed, because sloppy calligraphy suggests sloppy thinking. And sloppy thinking has no place in an administration that governs millions of people through the careful application of detailed rules and unwavering attention to proper procedure. The morning's correspondence requires responses that must be crafted with exquisite care, balancing honesty with diplomacy, efficiency with proper respect for hierarchy, and personal opinion with official policy. A letter from a village headman requesting permission to repair a bridge destroyed by recent floods seems simple enough, but the response must consider not only the obvious need for transportation, but also the budgetary implications for the domain, the precedent that approval might set for other requests, and the proper channels through which such work must be authorized and supervised. Our samurai drafts his response with painstaking attention to every nuance of language, ensuring that his words convey appropriate respect for the headman's position while clearly explaining the steps that must be followed to move the request through proper administrative channels. Each brushstroke becomes an exercise in diplomatic precision. The physical act of writing serving as a form of meditation that helps focus his thoughts on the complex considerations that govern every administrative decision. The paper accepts ink with a soft whisper, characters forming in flowing lines that must balance artistic beauty with official clarity. It's ornate, and the writing might be seen as showing off. It's too simple, and it might suggest insufficient respect for the document's importance. The correct style requires years to master, a visual language that communicates not only the literal meaning of words, but also the writer's understanding of proper relationships, appropriate humility, and administrative competence that marks him as worthy of the trust his position requires. Between documents, he pauses to rest his hand and realign his posture, maintaining the physical discipline that reflects inner spiritual discipline. The work is mentally demanding, requiring constant attention to detail and unwavering focus on accuracy, but it is also physically taxing in ways that will surprise those who imagine administrative work as restful compared to martial pursuits. Hours of maintaining perfect seated posture while manipulating delicate brushes create their own form of muscular strain, while the mental effort of navigating complex bureaucratic requirements produces a fatigue that reaches deep into his bones. Yet this work provides its own satisfactions. The quiet pleasure of problems solved through careful thought and precise communication, the sense of contributing to the vast machinery that maintains peace and order throughout the realm. The morning's routine includes checking and updating his personal records, ledgers that track not only his official duties, but also his household finances, family obligations, and the complex web of social relationships that define his place in Edo society. Each entry represents a careful calculation, a balancing of resources and responsibilities that requires the same attention to detail he brings to official documents. His salary, paid in rice rather than coin, must be allocated across fixed expenses and unpredictable needs, with careful reserves maintained for emergencies and seasonal variations in household costs. The numbers tell the story of a life lived within careful boundaries, where every expenditure must be justified and every luxury carefully weighed against more pressing needs. His personal correspondence demands equal attention, though the tone shifts from official formality to the more relaxed but still carefully structured language, appropriate for communications between social equals. A letter from a childhood friend now serving in a distant province must be answered with news of Edo life, shared memories that maintain their connection across geographical and temporal distance, and subtle inquiries about opportunities that might benefit both their careers without appearing inappropriately ambitious or disloyal to their current positions. These personal relationships, maintained through decades of careful correspondence, form an invisible network of mutual support and information exchange that can prove invaluable in navigating through complex politics of Tokugawa administration. The rhythm of morning paperwork creates its own music. The soft scratching of brush against paper is punctuated by the occasional pause for reflection or the gentle sound of papers being shuffled and organized. Outside his window, the city awakens with its own familiar symphony, the calls of vendors beginning their daily rounds, the rhythmic sound of wooden sandals on cobblestones, the distant bells from various temples, marking the progression of time through the ordered hours of the Edo day. These sounds provide a comforting backdrop to his solitary work, reminders of the larger community his administrative duties serve, the vast network of human activity that his careful attention to paperwork helps coordinate and maintain. As the morning progresses, the pile of completed documents grows, while the stack of items requiring attention slowly diminishes. Each finished task bringing its own small satisfaction and moving him closer to the moment when he can transition from desk work to the other duties that will fill his carefully structured day. The inkstone has been replenished twice, the brushes cleaned and repositioned according to their specialized functions, and his posture has been adjusted countless times to maintain the perfect balance between comfort and propriety that allows him to work efficiently while preserving the dignity his position demands. This quiet persistence, his willingness to find meaning and purpose in tasks that others might dismiss as tedious, represents perhaps the most essential quality of successful service in the Tokugawa bureaucracy. The ability to embrace routine as a form of spiritual discipline and administrative necessity as a path towards social harmony. The transition from mental to physical discipline marks a sacred boundary in our samurai's daily routine. A moment when the accumulated tension of hours spent hunched over documents finds release through the ancient forms that connect him to generations of warriors who came before. The small courtyard behind his dwelling, no larger than a modern parking space, becomes his dojo. Its packed earth surface worn smooth by countless sessions of solitary practice that maintain not only his physical conditioning but also his spiritual connection to the warrior tradition that defines his identity even in this age of enforced peace. The wooden practice sword, or baking, that he retrieves from its place of honor beside his writing desk carries the weight of history in its familiar grain. Its surface darkened by years of use and marked with the subtle indentations that speak of dedicated practice and unwavering commitment to martial excellence. The baken itself tells a story of adaptation and persistence. Carved from sturdy oak by a craftsman whose family has served samurai for generations, its weight and balance carefully calibrated to approximate the feel of a real katana while avoiding the lethal edge that might complicate practice in the cramped quarters of urban Edo. The wood has aged to a deep honey color, its surface polished by thousands of hours of contact with human hands, and its grip worn smooth in the precise pattern created by proper sword-holding technique. This simple tool represents one of the few connections our samurai maintains to the martial heritage of his class, tangible link to ancestors who carried steel rather than brushes and whose battles were fought on muddy fields rather than in paper-cluttered offices filled with the quiet scratch of calligraphy and the whispered negotiations of bureaucratic compromise. His practice begins with the ritual, cleaning and inspection of the training space, a process that serves both practical and spiritual purposes as he removes any debris that might interfere with proper footwork, while simultaneously clearing his mind of the administrative concerns that have occupied his thoughts throughout the morning hours. Each stone is examined and repositioned if necessary, every fallen leaf carefully removed, and the earth itself is raked smooth in preparation for the demanding physical work ahead. This attention to environmental preparation reflects the same meticulous care he brings to arranging his writing materials, demonstrating how the principles of proper preparation and respectful attention to detail permeate every aspect of his disciplined existence. Whether he is wielding brush or sword in service to his duties and his personal development, the opening movements of his practice session follow forms learned in childhood when his father first placed a practice sword in his small hands and began the long process of transmitting martial knowledge that stretches back through centuries of samurai tradition. Each kata, or formal exercise, begins with a moment of profound stillness, the wooden sword held in perfect readiness while his mind achieves the clarity and focus that effective martial practice demands. His breathing deepens and slows, following rhythms that connect physical movement to spiritual cultivation, while his feet find their proper stance with the automatic precision that only years of dedicated practice can create. The familiar weight of the bakken in his hands awakens muscle memory that transcends conscious thought, connecting him to the collective wisdom of countless generations who have walked this same path of martial discipline and spiritual development. First cuts slice through the morning air with a whispered sound that speaks of proper technique and focused intention, each movement flowing seamlessly into the next in patterns that have been refined over centuries of use in actual combat and peaceful practice alike. His body moves with the controlled precision of a master calligrapher forming characters, every gesture deliberate and economical. Waste eliminated through years of careful instruction and patient self-correction. The wooden blade follows precise arcs through three-dimensional space, its path determined by principles of leverage, timing, and anatomical efficiency that represent the accumulated wisdom of countless martial artists who have dedicated their lives to understanding the geometry of conflict and the physics of human movement under stress and pressure. As his practice intensifies, sweat begins to darken his training clothes, the physical exertion awakening his body from the sedentary constraints of morning desk work and reminding him of capabilities that bureaucratic duties rarely call upon, but that remain essential to his identity as a member of the warrior class. His breathing becomes more pronounced, visible in the cool morning air as small clouds of vapor that dissipate quickly in the gentle breeze that carries the sense of cooking rice and burning charcoal from neighboring households, beginning their own daily routines. The repetitive nature of the forms induces a meditative state where conscious thought yields to embodied knowledge, where the accumulated wisdom of centuries guides his movements with an authority that transcends individual understanding and connects him to the eternal principles that govern both martial arts and spiritual development. Each sequence of movements tells a story of combat refined into art, violence transformed into dance, and practical technique elevated to the level of spiritual practice that nourishes both body and soul. The bakken becomes an extension of his will, its wooden length serving as a conductor's baton that orchestrates the complex symphony of muscle, bone, and breath that creates effective martial technique. His feet find their marks on the packed earth with the precision of a dancer, each step calculated to provide maximum stability and mobility, while maintaining the centered balance that allows for rapid transitions between offensive and defensive actions. The forms demand complete attention, absolute presence in the current moment, quality of focused awareness that provides welcome relief from the complex mental calculations and diplomatic considerations that characterize his administrative duties. The solo nature of his practice reflects the reality of samurai life in the Tokugawa era, where opportunities for sparring and group training had become rare due to both practical constraints and the social policies that discourage anything resembling military preparation among the lower ranks of the warrior class. His training partners exist only in imagination, ghostly opponents whose attacks must be visualized and countered through movements that demonstrate proper timing and distance even in the absence of actual threat. This solitary practice demands even greater mental discipline than partner training, requiring him to maintain focus and intensity without the external stimulus of genuine opposition, to find motivation and meaning in movements that may never be tested against human opponents who pose real danger to his safety or his life. The progression of his morning routine follows patterns established by decades of consistent practice, beginning with basic cutting exercises that warm his muscles and prepare his body for more complex movements, advancing through intermediate forms that combine multiple techniques in flowing sequences, and culminating in advanced kata that demand the highest levels of physical coordination and mental concentration. Each level builds upon the previous one, creating a graduated progression that challenges his abilities while respecting the limitations imposed by age, available practice time, and the physical demands of his sedentary professional duties. The wisdom embedded in this traditional structure ensures that his practice remains both sustainable and progressive, allowing him to maintain and gradually prove his skills despite the constraints imposed by his bureaucratic responsibilities. The sound of his practice creates its own rhythm in the morning air. The sharp crack of the bakken cutting through space, punctuated by the soft shuffle of his feet on the packed earth, and the controlled exhalation that accompanies each major technique. These sounds become part of the largest symphony of urban awakening that surrounds his small courtyard. The distant calls of temple bells marking the progression of time. The rhythmic sounds of craftsmen beginning their daily work, and the gentle murmur of conversations from neighboring households as families prepare for their own versions of the structured day, defines life in Tokugawa Edo. His practice becomes both solitary meditation and community participation, a private ritual that nevertheless contributes to the larger patterns of urban life and social harmony. As his session draws toward its conclusion, our samurai performs the final movements with particular attention to form and spiritual content, recognizing that the ending of practice is as important as its beginning and requires the same level of mental focus and physical precision that characterizes effective martial arts training. The wooden sword returns to its starting position with ceremonial gravity, held in perfect stillness while his breathing gradually returns to normal and his mind transitions from the focused intensity of combat preparation to the calm readiness that carry him through the remainder of his day. This moment of transition requires its own form of discipline, a conscious shift from the martial mindset that governs effective training to the diplomatic awareness that bureaucratic duties demand. Yet, both states of consciousness share the fundamental requirement for complete presence and unwavering attention to proper form and procedure. The cleaning and storage of his training equipment follows the same meticulous patterns that govern every other aspect of his daily routine. Bakken, receiving careful inspection for any damage or wear that might affect his performance or safety during future practice sessions. A soft cloth removes the accumulated moisture from its surface, while his hands check for splinters or cracks that might indicate the need for repair or replacement. The wooden sword returns to its designated place with the reverence due to a sacred object, positioned precisely within easy reach for tomorrow's practice session, while remaining safely away from casual contact that might damage its carefully maintained surface or disturb the spiritual significance it holds as a connection to his martial heritage and personal discipline. The conclusion of his training session leaves our samurai in a state of physical warmth and mental clarity that will inform his approach to the administrative and social challenges that await him. Throughout the remainder of the day, the endorphins released by vigorous physical activity combine with the meditative effects of focused practice to create a sense of centered calm that no amount of sedentary work can provide, while the renewed connection to his martial identity strengthens his confidence and self-respect in ways that prove invaluable when navigating the complex hierarchies and diplomatic challenges of Tokugawa bureaucracy. The simple act of maintaining his fighting skills, even in an age when those skills may never be tested in actual combat, provides a foundation of personal integrity and authentic identity that sustains him through the compromises and accommodations that characterize successful service in a peacetime administration. The transformation of Japan from a realm of warring domains into a unified state governed by bureaucratic precision required not merely the political genius of Ieyasu's strategic vision, but also the development of administrative systems so comprehensive and so finely tuned that they could manage the daily lives of millions of people while maintaining the delicate balance of interests and loyalties that kept the peace for over 2 centuries. The paperwork that fills our samurai's morning hours represents just one small component of this vast machinery. A single thread in a tapestry of documentation, regulation, and oversight that extended from the humblest village to the shogun's palace, creating a network of information and control that made effective governance possible without constant threat of military intervention that had characterized earlier periods of Japanese history. The genius of this system lay not in its complexity, though it was remarkably sophisticated, but in its ability to transform the natural human tendencies toward competition and conflict into productive activities that served both individual ambition and collective welfare. The foundation of Tokugawa administration rested upon principles borrowed from Chinese Confucian philosophy but adapted to Japanese conditions and circumstances in ways that created something entirely new in the history of governmental organization, where traditional Chinese administration relied heavily on examination systems that selected officials based on their mastery of classical texts and literary composition. The Tokugawa system combined merit-based selection with hereditary privilege in ways that preserves social stability while ensuring administrative competence. Samurai, like our protagonists, inherited their basic eligibility for government service through their family background and class membership. But advancement within the system depended upon demonstrated ability to master the complex skills required for effective bureaucratic work. Calligraphy that met the highest standards of aesthetic and technical excellence. Mathematical competence sufficient to manage complicated financial calculations and budget projections. Diplomatic sensitivity that allowed navigation of delicate political relationships. And the physical and mental discipline necessary to maintain consistent performance under the pressure of demanding schedules and exacting standards. The daily routine of administrative work that occupies so much of our samurai's time follows patterns established through decades of experimentation and refinement. Each procedure designed to minimize the possibility of error, corruption, or miscommunication, while maximizing the efficiency with which information flows through the governmental hierarchy. The forms he fills out, the reports he compiles, and the correspondence he maintains all follow standardized formats that allow officials at different levels of the system to quickly locate and verify the information they need to make informed decisions about policy implementation and resource allocation. This standardization extends beyond mere paperwork to encompass everything from the physical layout of offices and the scheduling of meetings to the language used in official communications and the protocols governing relationships between officials of different ranks and responsibilities. The complexity of managing the Sankenkatai system alone required innovations in administrative technique that had no precedent in Japanese history and few parallels anywhere in the world. The movement of hundreds of daimyo households between their home domains and the capital each year created logistical challenges that demanded solutions requiring careful coordination between multiple levels of government and dozens of different administrative specialties. Transportation schedules had to be coordinated to prevent conflicts and delays while ensuring that adequate accommodations and supplies were available at every stopping point along the major highways. Security arrangements required cooperation between domain authorities and central government officials to protect traveling daimyo from bandits and accidents while preventing them from making unauthorized contacts or conducting private business that might threaten the political stability that the system was designed to maintain. The financial aspects of the Sankenkatai system created administrative challenges that pushed the boundaries of contemporary accounting and budgeting practices, requiring the development of new techniques for tracking expenses, allocating resources, and predicting future costs across multiple domains and time periods. Officials, like our samurai, found themselves dealing with calculations that involved not merely the traditional rice-based economy that had characterized earlier periods of Japanese history, but also the increasingly complex monetary systems that were developing to handle the commercial transactions generated by increased travel and trade. the conversion between different types of currency, the calculation of exchange rates between regions with different economic conditions, and the projection of expenses for journeys that might be affected by weather, political developments, or changes in the availability of supplies, all required mathematical skills and analytical abilities that went far beyond what had traditionally been expected of samurai administrators. The information-gathering aspects of the Senkenkatai system created opportunities for the development of intelligence networks that provided the central government with unprecedented knowledge about conditions throughout the realm, but also created administrative burdens that required careful management to prevent the system from collapsing under its own weight. Reports from domain officials, observations by government inspectors, intelligence gathered by merchants and travelers, and information provided by the daimyo themselves during their residence periods in Edo all had to be collected, verified, analyzed, and integrated into coherent assessments of political, economic, and social conditions that could inform policy decisions at the highest levels of government. The officials responsible for managing this information flow, including samurai of our protagonists' rank, who specialized in particular regions or types of intelligence, developed sophisticated techniques for evaluating source reliability, detecting patterns and trends, and presenting complex information in formats that busy decision-makers could quickly understand and act upon. The cultural implications of this administrative revolution extended far beyond the immediate requirements of governmental efficiency, creating new forms of social identity and professional pride that transformed the self-conception of the samurai class in their role in Japanese society. No longer primarily warriors whose status derived from their skill with weapons and their willingness to face death in battle. Samurai administrators found meaning and purpose in their mastery of the intellectual and organizational skills required for effective governance in an era of peace and prosperity. The careful attention to detail that characterizes our samurai's approach to his mourning paperwork reflects not merely professional competence, but also a form of aesthetic and spiritual discipline that found beauty and significance in activities that earlier generations might have dismissed as beneath the dignity of the warrior class. The development of specialized administrative roles created career paths that allowed ambitious and capable samurai to advance through the governmental hierarchy based on demonstrated competence rather than military achievement or family connections alone. Officials who showed particular aptitude for financial management might find themselves assigned to increasingly responsible positions in the complex system of domain budgeting and resource allocation that kept the Senkenkatai system functioning smoothly. Those with diplomatic skills and cultural sensitivity might be selected for positions that required interaction with daimyo families during their residence periods in Edo, helping to manage the delicate relationships that kept potential opposition leaders satisfied with their treatment while ensuring that they remained loyal to the central government. Scholars and intellectuals might find opportunities in the expanding systems of education and cultural administration that supported the shogunate's efforts to maintain its ideological unity and social harmony throughout the realm. The physical infrastructure required to support this administrative revolution created employment opportunities and economic stimulation that extended far beyond the direct needs of government operations, generating a complex economy of service providers, suppliers, and support personnel whose livelihoods depended upon the smooth functioning of the bureaucratic machinery. The production of paper, brushes, ink, and other writing materials became major industries, employing thousands of craftsmen whose products had to meet exacting standards of quality and consistency. The construction and maintenance of government buildings, from major administrative complexes in Edo to small local offices in remote villages, provided work for carpenters, plasterers, roofers, and other construction specialists whose skills adapted traditional building techniques to the specific requirements of governmental operations. The training and education systems required to prepare samurai for their new administrative roles created another layer of economic activity and cultural development. Schools, tutors, and educational materials supporting a learning infrastructure that extended throughout the country and involved students from every level of the samurai hierarchy. Young samurai like our protagonist had once received in their youth spent years mastering not only the traditional martial arts and military sciences that defined their class identity, but also the literary, mathematical, and social skills that would allow them to function effectively in the bureaucratic environment that now provided their primary career opportunities. This educational preparation required investments of time and resources that shaped family budgets and life planning decisions, while creating networks of shared experience and common training that helped maintain consistency and quality in administrative performance across the entire governmental system. The psychological and social effects of this transformation created both opportunities and challenges for individual samurai and their families, requiring adaptations in personal identity and social relationships that reflected the broader changes occurring throughout Japanese society during the Tokugawa period. The shift from military to administrative careers required different personality traits and social skills, favoring individuals who could work effectively within hierarchical organizations and maintain consistent performance over long periods of time, rather than those who excelled in the crisis situations and individual combat that had characterized earlier forms of samurai service. The regular schedules and predictable routines that characterize our samurai's daily life reflect this new environment, where success depended upon reliability, attention to detail, and the ability to maintain professional relationships with colleagues and superiors over many years of shared work, rather than the intense but brief relationships formed during military campaigns and battles. The financial constraints that shape our samurai's careful budgeting and modest lifestyle reflect not merely the personal economic circumstances, but also the broader fiscal pressures created by the Senkin-Katai system and the administrative apparatus required to support it. The expenses of maintaining dual residences and funding regular travel consumed significant portions of domain budgets, creating pressures that forced many daimyo to economize on samurai salaries and benefits, while simultaneously requiring larger numbers of administrative personnel to manage the increasingly complex logistics of their operations. This created a situation where opportunities for employment in government service expanded, even as the compensation for such service remained constrained by the overall financial limitations that affected the entire system. The result was a class of educated and capable administrators whose living standards remained modest, despite their important contributions to the maintenance of political stability and social order. The true test of Ieyasu's administrative genius revealed itself not in the smooth functioning of normal operations, but in the system's remarkable ability to respond to crises, and unexpected challenges while maintaining the social stability and political unity that formed the foundation of Tokugawa rule. The great fires that periodically swept through Edo's densely packed wooden neighborhoods, the famines that resulted from crop failures and natural disasters, the earthquakes that could destroy entire districts in minutes, and the epidemics that spread rapidly through populations with no understanding of disease transmission, all posed threats that could have destabilized governments built on less secure foundations. Yet the administrative machinery developed by Ieyasu and refined by his successors proved capable of coordinating responses to these emergencies that not only minimized their immediate impact, but actually strengthened the bonds of loyalty and dependence that held the entire system together. The great fires they gave Edo its nickname as the Flowers of Edo created recurring crises that tested every aspect of the administrative system, from the immediate challenges of evacuation and firefighting to the longer-term problems of reconstruction and economic recovery. These conflagrations, which could consume thousands of buildings in a single night, required response protocols that coordinated the efforts of multiple domains, numerous government agencies, and countless private organizations in ways that demanded unprecedented levels of planning, communication, and resource management. The samurai administrators who managed these responses, including officials of our protagonists' rank who specialized in disaster coordination, developed sophisticated techniques for rapid deployment of personnel and supplies, temporary housing, and feeding of displaced populations, and the systematic reconstruction of destroyed neighborhoods according to improved building codes and fire prevention standards. The administrative response to major fires followed procedures that have been refined through decades of experience with urban disasters, creating a bureaucratic choreography that could swing into action within hours of the first alarm bells. Messenger networks spread word of the disaster throughout the city and to outlying areas where resources and personnel might be mobilized for assistance. Warehouses maintained specifically for disaster relief were opened and their contents distributed, according to predetermined allocation formulas that ensured equitable treatment of victims while prioritizing the most urgent needs. Temporary shelters were established in temples, schools, and other public buildings, according to plans that had been developed and updated through regular drills and exercises. The coordination of these activities required paperwork and record-keeping that continued even during the height of emergency operations, creating documentation that would later be analyzed to improve future responses and ensure accountability for resources and decisions. The reconstruction efforts that followed major fires created opportunities for implementing improvements in urban planning and building design that gradually transformed Edo from a chaotic collection of wooden structures into a more rationally organized city with wider streets, better drainage, and more effective fire prevention systems. These improvements required careful coordination between government officials and private property owners, with regulations that balanced public safety concerns against individual property rights and economic interests. The administration of these reconstruction projects involved countless decisions about building permits, zoning restrictions, compensation for displaced residents, and the allocation of public resources for infrastructure improvements. Samurai administrators found themselves dealing with property disputes, construction quality standards, and neighborhood planning issues that required not only technical knowledge, but also diplomatic skills and the ability to balance competing interests while maintaining public support for government policies. The management of famine relief operations revealed another dimension of the administrative system's sophistication, as officials developed techniques for coordinating food distribution, agricultural assistance, and economic support that could respond to crop failures affecting entire regions while preventing social unrest that might threaten political stability. The early warning systems that monitored weather conditions, crop yields, and food prices throughout the realm provided government officials with information that allowed them to anticipate and prepare for potential shortages before they reached crisis levels. When famines did occur, the response involved not merely the distribution of emergency food supplies, but also longer-term measures to restore agricultural productivity, support displaced farmers, and prevent the social disruption that could result from mass migration and economic dislocation. The paperwork associated with famine relief operations created some of the most complex administrative challenges faced by the Tokugawa system, requiring careful tracking of food, supplies, population, movements, and resource allocation across multiple domains and administrative jurisdictions. Officials had to maintain accurate records of who received assistance, what types of aid were provided, and how resources were distributed to ensure both effectiveness and accountability. The coordination between central government agencies and local authorities required constant communication and careful negotiation to balance the need for rapid response with the requirements of proper procedure and fiscal responsibility. These operations created precedents and developed expertise that informed the government's approach to other types of emergencies and established principles of disaster management that influenced administrative practice throughout the Tokugawa period. The response to epidemic diseases created particularly challenging administrative problems, as officials struggled to implement public health measures with limited understanding of disease transmission while maintaining the social order and economic activity that formed the foundation of the system's stability. The isolation of affected areas, the restriction of travel and trade, and the provision of medical care and supplies all required decisions that balanced health concerns against economic and political considerations in ways that demanded both scientific knowledge and diplomatic sensitivity. The administrative apparatus developed techniques for monitoring disease outbreaks, coordinating medical responses, and managing public information that helped prevent panic while encouraging compliance with health measures that might otherwise have been resisted by populations who did not understand their scientific rationale. The documentation requirements associated with epidemic response created new categories of administrative work that required specialized knowledge and training, as officials learned to maintain health statistics, track disease progression, and coordinate with medical practitioners whose knowledge was often limited by the scientific understanding of their era. The quarantine procedures that were implemented during major outbreaks required constant monitoring and enforcement, with officials responsible for ensuring compliance while providing necessary supplies and support to isolated populations. The economic disruption caused by these health measures created additional administrative challenges, as officials worked to maintain essential services and prevent economic collapse while implementing restrictions that interfered with normal commercial and social activities. The long-term effects of these crises management experiences strengthened the administrative system by creating cadres of experienced officials who demonstrated their ability to function effectively under pressure while developing new techniques and procedures that improved the government's capacity to respond to future emergencies. The documentation and analysis of these experiences created an institutional memory that formed training programs and policy development, while the successful management of repeated crises enhanced public confidence in the government's competence and legitimacy. The career opportunities created by disaster management work provided advancement paths for capable administrators like our samurai protagonists, whose skills in organization, communication, and problem-solving under pressure made them valuable assets for a government that faced constant challenges to maintain stability in an inherently unstable world. The integration of crisis management capabilities into the normal administrative structure created a form of organizational resilience that allowed the Tokugawa system to survive challenges that might have overwhelmed governments with less sophisticated bureaucratic foundations. The same officials who processed routine paperwork during normal periods could be rapidly redeployed to emergency functions when disasters struck, while the information networks and communication systems developed for regular administrative purposes provided the infrastructure necessary for coordinating complex emergency responses. This dual-purpose approach to administrative organization created the efficiencies that allowed the government to maintain comprehensive emergency capabilities without the expense of maintaining separate disaster response bureaucracies during normal periods. The psychological effects of successful crisis management on both officials and the general population created forms of confidence and institutional loyalty that strengthened the political foundations of the Tokugawa system in ways that purely administrative efficiency could not achieve. Citizens who had experienced effective government assistance during emergencies developed personal connections to the system that went beyond abstract political loyalty, while officials who had participated in successful crisis responses gained practical experience and professional satisfaction that enhanced their commitment to their work and their government. These emotional and psychological bonds created forms of political stability that complemented the structural and economic factors that supported Tokugawa rule, creating multiple layers of support that made the system remarkably resistant to the kinds of political challenges that had destabilized earlier forms of Japanese government. The international implications of Japan's domestic stability during the Tokugawa period created opportunities and challenges that required administrative responses to foreign policy issues, even while maintaining the isolation policies that limited contact with other countries. The management of limited trade relationships with China, Korea, and the Netherlands required specialized knowledge and careful coordination between domestic administrators and officials responsible for foreign affairs. The monitoring of international developments and the assessment of their potential impact on domestic policy required intelligence gathering and analysis, capabilities that drew upon the same administrative skills and organizational structures that were used for domestic crisis management and routine governmental operations. The legacy of these administrative innovations extended far beyond their immediate impact on Tokugawa governance, creating precedents and developing capabilities that would prove crucial during the rapid modernization and international integration that characterized Japan's development in later periods. The educational systems, communication networks, and organizational structures developed to support Tokugawa administration provided foundations that facilitated the country's remarkably successful adaptation to changing international conditions and technological developments. The administrative culture of careful planning, systematic implementation, is continuous improvement that characterizes our samurai's approach to his daily work reflects values and practices that contributed not only to the stability and prosperity of the Tokugawa period, but also to Japan's unique success in maintaining its cultural identity while adapting to the challenges and cane. Today, I just know it's going to be a really good day because I'm going to start out by going to Starbucks. Of the Gumpics, of the Starty, of C's, me, S.A.'s, C, me, C, 1, S, 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 as, A, as, ag, as, at, as, at, agmas, as, opportunities of an increasingly interconnected world. As our samurai completes his morning administrative duties and prepares for the social obligations that will fill his afternoon hours, his movements carry him through a city whose carefully regulated pleasures and precisely controlled entertainments reveal as much about the genius of Tokugawa governance as do the official documents that occupy so much of his professional attention. Beyond the austere world of government offices and formal ceremonies lies another realm entirely, one where the rigid hierarchies and behavioral constraints of daily life give way to a parallel universe of licensed pleasure and calculated transgression that serves the social and political functions of the state as effectively as any law or regulation. The pleasure quarters of Edo, with their elaborate theaters, exclusive tea houses, and famous courtesans, represent not a rejection of official order, but rather its most sophisticated expression, a safety valve that allows the release of tensions and desires that might otherwise threaten the stability of the carefully balanced society that Ieyasu's successors have worked so diligently to create and maintain. The establishment of Yashiwara, the great pleasure quarter that became synonymous with the floating world of Edo culture, represents one of the most fascinating examples of social engineering in human history. A deliberate attempt to contain and control human sexuality and artistic expression within boundaries that serve the interests of political stability while providing outlets for creativity and passion that might otherwise have found expression in more dangerous forms. The location of this walled district, originally situated in marshlands outside the city proper, but later moved to a more convenient location that remained symbolically separate from the respectable neighborhoods where families lived and conducted their daily business, created a physical and psychological boundary that allowed visitors to step temporarily, outside the normal rules of social behavior, while ensuring that their transgressions remained within carefully defined limits that posed no threat to the broader social order. The walls that surrounded Yoshiwara served multiple functions beyond the obvious one of physical containment, creating a symbolic boundary between the ordinary world of duty and responsibility and the extraordinary realm of pleasure and artistic expression, where different rules applied and different values prevailed. These walls, constructed of wood and earth with imposing gates that were closed and guarded during certain hours, created both exclusion and inclusion, keeping out those who could not afford the expensive entertainments offered within, while providing a sense of security and privacy for those who could. The architecture of containment extended beyond mere physical barriers to encompass a complex system of regulations and protocols that governed everything from the types of entertainment that could be offered to the social relationships between customers and performers, creating a world that was simultaneously free and constrained, liberated and controlled. The internal organization of Yoshiwara followed principles that reflected both commercial efficiency and aesthetic sophistication, with streets and districts arranged according to a hierarchy of expense and exclusivity that ensured appropriate segregation between different classes of customers, while providing opportunities for advancement and mobility within the entertainment industry that paralleled similar structures in the broader society. The most prestigious tea houses and the most famous courtesans occupied the central areas of the district, their elaborate buildings and gardens serving as showcases for the refined culture and artistic excellence that distinguished Yoshiwara from cruder forms of commercial entertainment. The architecture of these establishments, with their multiple stories, hidden passages, hidden carefully designed interior spaces, created environments that enhanced the theatrical and ritualistic aspects of the entertainment they provided, while ensuring privacy and exclusivity for their high-paying clientele. The regulation of activities within Yoshiwara required administrative oversight that rivaled in complexity the management of any other aspect of Edo society, with official inspectors, licensed operators, and detailed record-keeping systems that ensured compliance with government policies, while preventing the kinds of disorder and exploitation that might have undermined public support for the quarter's continued existence. The licensing systems that governed the operation of tea houses, the employment of entertainers, and the provision of various services created bureaucratic structures that provided both quality control and revenue generation for the government, while establishing clear legal frameworks that protected the rights and interests of all participants within the carefully defined boundaries of acceptable behavior. The economic functions of Yoshiwara extended far beyond the immediate revenue generated by entertainment services, creating a complex ecosystem of supporting businesses and service providers that contributed significantly to the broader economy of Edo, while providing employment opportunities for thousands of people whose livelihoods depended upon the continued prosperity of the pleasure quarters. The production of the elaborate costumes, cosmetics, accessories required for the theatrical presentations that formed the heart of Yoshiwara culture supported textile workers, craftsmen, and artists whose skills reached levels of refinement that influenced fashion and aesthetic standards throughout Japanese society. The restaurants, hotels, and transportation services that catered to visitors created additional layers of economic activity that extended the quarter's influence far beyond its physical boundaries. The cultural significance of Yoshiwara as a center for artistic innovation and creative expression created influences that shaped Japanese aesthetics and cultural values in ways that extended far beyond the immediate context of commercial entertainment. The elaborate performances staged in the quarters, theaters, and tea houses provided venues for experimentation with new forms of music, dance, and dramatic presentation that influenced the development of kabuki and other traditional arts. The fashion innovations introduced by the quarter's most famous courtesans set trends that were copied throughout Edo society, while the literary and artistic works inspired by the floating world created new genres and styles that enriched Japanese culture and provided models for creative expression that influenced artists and writers for generations. The social functions served by Yoshiwara is a meeting place where rigid class boundaries could be temporarily relaxed, created opportunities for interaction and cultural exchange that might not have been possible within the normal constraints of Tokugawa society. Merchants whose wealth exceeded that of many samurai, but whose social status remained officially inferior, could enjoy entertainments and social recognition within the quarter that were denied them in other contexts. Young samurai, like our protagonist, whose official duties required constant attention to proper behavior and social hierarchy, could experience forms of relaxation and personal expression that provided psychological relief from the demands of their professional lives while remaining within acceptable bounds of social behavior. The information networks that developed around Yoshiwara's social and commercial activities created unofficial channels of communication that complemented the official intelligence gathering systems upon which the government relied for information about public opinion and social conditions. The conversations that took place in tea houses and theaters provided insights into popular attitudes, economic conditions, and political sentiments that might not have been expressed through formal channels. While the social connections formed within the quarter created relationships that could influence business dealings and political activities throughout the broader society. Government officials who understood the value of this informal intelligence network often found ways to monitor activities within Yoshiwara without interfering with its operations, recognizing that the quarter's continued prosperity served important functions in maintaining social stability and providing outlets for energies that might otherwise have found expression in less controllable forms. The artistic documentation of Yoshiwara life through woodblock prints, illustrated books, and other popular media created a permanent record of Edo culture that provides modern observers with detailed insights into the daily life, fashion, and social relationships of the period, while simultaneously serving contemporary functions as entertainment, gamut, and social commentary. The ukiyo-e prints that depicted famous courtesans, theatrical performances, and social gatherings within the quarter became some of the most sophisticated and influential artworks of the Tokugawa period. Their technical innovations and aesthetic achievements influencing artistic development both within Japan and, eventually, in Western countries that encountered these works through trade and cultural exchange. The relationship between Yoshiwara and the official world of government and social responsibility remained complex and carefully managed, with regulations that ensured the quarter's activities remained subordinate to broader social purposes, while allowing sufficient freedom and creativity to maintain its effectiveness as both an economic enterprise and a cultural institution. Officials like our samurai, who might occasionally visit the quarter for business or social purposes, had to navigate carefully between their official duties and their personal interests, maintaining the proper appearances and avoiding the kinds of excessive involvement that might compromise their professional effectiveness or social reputation. The protocols governing such visits, the appropriate ways of conducting oneself within the quarter, and the limits of acceptable behavior all required understanding of subtle social codes that were never formally written down, but were nevertheless well understood by those who needed to know them. The seasonal rhythms that governed life within Yoshiwara created a calendar of festivals, celebrations, and special events that provided structure and variety to the quarter's activities while connecting its internal culture to the broader patterns of Japanese social and religious life. The cherry blossom viewing parties that marked the arrival of spring, the summer festivals that provided opportunities for elaborate displays of costume and performance, and the year-end celebrations that marked the transition between years all, created occasions for special entertainments and social gatherings that strengthened the bonds between the quarter and the broader community, while providing economic peaks that supported the complex infrastructure of businesses and services that made the quarter's operations possible. The theatrical traditions that flourished during the Tokugawa period represent perhaps the most visible and accessible expressions of this complex relationship between artistic creativity and social control that characterized Japanese culture during this era of enforced peace and carefully managed prosperity. The development of kabuki from its origins as a somewhat scandalous form of popular entertainment into a sophisticated theatrical art that enjoyed official recognition and patronage illustrates the remarkable ability of Tokugawa society to absorb and transform potentially disruptive cultural forces into institutions that served the broader purposes of social harmony and political stability. For samurai, like our protagonist, its official duties rarely provided opportunities for direct artistic expression. The kabuki theater offered a window into a world where emotion, passion, and individual creativity could find legitimate expression within frameworks that remained carefully controlled and socially acceptable. The origins of kabuki in the early 17th century revealed the complex dynamics of cultural innovation within the constraints of a highly regulated society. As female performers originally associated with the pleasure quarters developed new forms of dance and dramatic presentation that combined traditional elements with innovative techniques and subject matter. The early kabuki performances, with their emphasis on sensual movement, elaborate costumes, and emotionally charged narratives, attracted audiences that crossed traditional class boundaries while creating social and political concerns that eventually led to government intervention and regulation. The banning of female performers and their replacement by male actors created new artistic challenges and opportunities that ultimately enriched the theatrical tradition while ensuring its compatibility with official standards of moral propriety and social order. The all-male kabuki companies that emerged from these early restrictions developed performance techniques and artistic conventions that transformed the limitations imposed by government regulation into sources of creative innovation and aesthetic sophistication. The enagata, or male actors who specialized in female roles, created a highly stylized form of gender performance that transcended simple imitation to become a distinct art form that explored themes of identity, desire, and social relationship in ways that were both theatrically effective and socially acceptable. The development of these performance traditions required years of intensive training and artistic dedication that paralleled the discipline and commitment required for other forms of traditional Japanese arts, creating professional standards and artistic hierarchies that provided structure and meaning for practitioners while ensuring quality and consistency for audiences. The physical theaters where kabuki performances took place became architectural marvels that demonstrated the sophisticated engineering and aesthetic principles that characterize many aspects of Tokugawa culture, with innovative stage designs, lighting systems, and acoustic arrangements that enhanced the theatrical experience, while accommodating the large audiences that popular performances could attract. The famous revolving stages that allowed for rapid scene changes, the runways that extended through the audience to create intimate connections between performers and spectators, and the elaborate mechanical devices that produced special effects, all represented technological innovations that served artistic purposes while demonstrating the high level of craftsmanship and technical skill that characterized Japanese artisanship during this period. The subject matter of kabuki plays reflected the complex relationship between popular culture and official ideology, with historical dramas that celebrated loyalty, honor, and proper social relationships alternating with contemporary stories that explored themes of love, conflict, and moral struggle within acceptable boundaries of social commentary and political criticism. The elaborate plots that often involved mistaken identities, family obligations, and conflicts between personal desire and social duty provided audiences with opportunities to explore vicariously the kinds of emotional and moral dilemmas that their own lives rarely allowed them to experience directly. The stylized performance conventions that characterized kabuki acting created sufficient distance between theatrical representation and real life to allow exploration of potentially controversial themes while maintaining the artificial boundaries that ensured these explorations remained safely within the realm of entertainment rather than political commentary. The audience composition at kabuki performances created temporary communities that transcended the normal boundaries of Tokugawa's social hierarchy, bringing together merchants, artisans, lower-ranking samurai, and even occasionally members of higher social classes in shared appreciation for artistic excellence and dramatic storytelling. The theater became one of the few public spaces where people from different backgrounds could gather for purposes other than commercial transactions or official ceremonies, creating opportunities for cultural exchange and social interaction that enriched urban life while remaining within acceptable bounds of public behavior. The protocols governing audience behavior, from the appropriate ways of expressing appreciation for performances to the social etiquette required for interactions between different classes of spectators, created informal but well-understood rules that allowed these gatherings to function smoothly without disrupting broader social harmony. The economic impact of the kabuki theater extended far beyond the immediate revenue generated by ticket sales and concessions, creating employment opportunities for hundreds of people whose skills and services supported the complex infrastructure required for professional theatrical production. The costume makers, stage builders, musicians, and other craftsmen who contributed to kabuki productions developed specialized techniques and artistic traditions that influenced fashion, decoration, and entertainment throughout Edo society. The printing industry that produced illustrated programs, actor portraits, and promotional materials created new forms of commercial art and popular literature that reached audiences far beyond those who could afford to attend actual performances, spreading theatrical styles and cultural values throughout the urban population. The system of actor rankings and fan followings that developed around kabuki performers created a form of celebrity culture that provided models for artistic achievement and public recognition that influenced social attitudes toward creativity, entertainment, and individual expression within the constraints of traditional Japanese society. The elaborate rating systems that compared actors' abilities in different types of roles. The published critiques that evaluated performances according to artistic and technical criteria. And the commercial enterprises that marketed actor images and personal items all contributed to a sophisticated entertainment industry that paralleled similar developments in other aspects of Tokugawa commercial culture. These celebrity systems provided pathways for social mobility and economic advancement that were based on artistic merit and popular appeal rather than hereditary status or family connections, creating alternative models of success and recognition that enriched the social landscape of urban Japan. The relationship between kabuki and the official world of government and administration remained carefully managed through licensing systems, content regulations, and periodic reviews that ensured theatrical activities remained compatible with broader social purposes while allowing sufficient creative freedom to maintain artistic vitality and popular appeal. The government officials responsible for overseeing theatrical activities, including samurai administrators like our protagonist who might be assigned to such duties, had to balance artistic concerns against political considerations while maintaining the kind of detailed oversight that characterized the Tokugawa administration of all forms of public activity. The protocols governing these interactions, the criteria used for evaluating acceptable content, and the procedures for resolving conflicts between artistic and official concerns all required diplomatic skills and cultural sensitivity that demonstrated the sophistication of the administrative systems that managed the complex relationship between creativity and control. The influence of kabuki on broader Japanese culture extended far beyond the immediate context of theatrical entertainment, creating aesthetic standards and artistic conventions that influenced everything from fashion and interior decoration to literature and visual arts. The elaborate makeup techniques, costume designs, and movement styles developed for kabuki performance became models that were adapted and modified for other forms of cultural expression. While the dramatic narratives and character types that proved popular in the theater influenced the development of novels, woodblock prints, and other forms of popular culture. The cross-pollination between theatrical and other artistic traditions created a rich cultural ecosystem that supported innovation and creativity while maintaining connections to traditional values and aesthetic principles. The training systems that prepared kabuki actors for their demanding profession created educational institutions that paralleled the schools and academies that trained samurai for administrative careers, rigorous curricula that emphasized technical skill, artistic sensitivity, and professional discipline. The master-apprentice relationships that structured this training provided models for the transmission of cultural knowledge and artistic tradition that influenced educational practices throughout Japanese society, while the performance standards and evaluation criteria used in theatrical training contributed to broader cultural discussions about excellence, dedication, and artistic achievement. The intersection between theatrical training and other forms of education created opportunities for cultural exchange and mutual influence that enriched both artistic and academic traditions. The seasonal programming that characterized kabuki theater created annual cycles of performances that connected theatrical culture to the broader rhythms of Japanese social and religious life. With special productions that celebrated holidays, commemorated historical events, and marked important transitions in the agricultural and ceremonial calendar. These seasonal connections strengthened the bonds between theatrical entertainment and community identity, while providing economic stability for theater companies and opportunities for artistic innovation that kept the tradition vital and responsive to changing social conditions. The ability of kabuki to adapt its content and presentation to reflect contemporary concerns while maintaining its essential artistic character demonstrated the flexibility and resilience that characterized many aspects of Tokugawa culture and contributed to the system's remarkable longevity and stability. The world that surrounds our samurai as he moves through his carefully ordered day speaks in a language of objects and materials that communicate meanings far more complex and nuanced than their simple, functional purposes might suggest to the casual observer. Every item in his modest dwelling, from the weathered wooden chest that holds his seasonal clothing to the simple ceramic tea bowl that graces his morning meal, carries messages about social status, aesthetic values, and personal identity that are read and interpreted by anyone with the cultural literacy to understand their subtle vocabulary. This material culture of Tokugawa Japan represents one of the most sophisticated systems of nonverbal communication ever developed. Complex code that allowed people to express ideas about class, location, taste, and character through their choices of household goods, personal accessories, and decorative objects, while remaining within the carefully defined boundaries of appropriate behavior for their social position. The family swords that rest in their place of honor within our samurai's home tell stories that extend far beyond their immediate function as symbols of warrior status and family pride. Their aged, metal, and time-darkened wood carrying the accumulated history of generations who wielded them in service to lords whose names had become legend. The blade itself, forged by a master swordsmith whose techniques were passed down through centuries of carefully guarded family tradition, represents not merely a weapon, but a work of art whose subtle curves and delicate hammered patterns demonstrate the intersection of practical function and aesthetic beauty that characterizes the finest examples of Japanese craftsmanship. The inscription on the tank, hidden beneath the silk-wrapped handle, records not only the smith's name and the date of creation, but also the spiritual and philosophical principles that guided the forging process, connecting the physical object to the metaphysical concepts that inform traditional Japanese approaches to craftsmanship and artistic creation. The mounting of the sword, with its lacquered, scabbard, and intricately carved Superguard reflects the aesthetic sensibilities and economic circumstances of the successive generations who owned and maintained the weapon, each owner adding or modifying elements according to their personal taste and financial resources, while respecting the overall integrity and historical significance of the piece. The choice of decorative motifs on the guard and fittings communicates information about family history, personal interests, and cultural education, while the quality of the lacquer work and the precision of the carving demonstrate the owner's ability to commission and appreciate fine craftsmanship. Even the way the sword is displayed within the home, its position relative to other important objects, and its orientation according to traditional principles of arrangement, communicates messages about the owner's understanding of proper protocol and his respect for the cultural traditions that the weapon represents. The personal accessories that our samurai carries as he moves through his daily routine create a portable statement of identity and status that can be read and interpreted by everyone he encounters. From the material and craftsmanship of his tobacco pouch to the design and execution of the netsuke that secure various items to his obi, these small objects, often overlooked by those unfamiliar with their cultural significance, represents some of the most sophisticated examples of miniature art and craftsmanship in world history. Their tiny surfaces, carved, painted, or inlaid, with designs that demonstrate extraordinary technical skill while communicating complex messages about their owner's education, aesthetic sensitivity, and social connections. The choice to carry a particular netsuke or inro represents not merely personal preference, but also a form of social communication that identifies the bearer as someone who understands and appreciates the subtle art of personal adornment within appropriate limits. The netsuke themselves, carved from materials ranging from humble wood and bone to precious ivory and rare stones, demonstrate the democratic nature of Japanese aesthetic culture, where artistic excellence was valued regardless of the cost or rarity of the materials used. A perfectly executed carving in simple boxwood might be more highly prized than a clumsily executed piece in expensive ivory, reflecting cultural values that emphasized skill, creativity, and spiritual content over mere material wealth. The subjects depicted on netsuke ranged from traditional, religious, and mythological themes to contemporary social commentary and humorous observations about daily life, creating a miniature gallery of Japanese culture that could be carried in one sleeve and shared with friends and acquaintances. As a form of social interaction and cultural exchange, the seasonal rotation of objects within the home created a constantly changing environment that reflected both the natural cycles of the year and the cultural traditions that connected human life to the broader patterns of cosmic change and renewal. The scroll that hangs in our samurai's tokonoma alcove changes with the seasons, its calligraphy and painting reflecting themes appropriate to each time of year while demonstrating the owner's cultural education and aesthetic sensitivity. The choice of which scroll to display during a particular season, the way it is hung and lit, and its relationship to other objects in the room all communicated information about the resident's understanding of traditional aesthetics and his ability to create harmonious environments that enhance daily life while respecting established cultural principles. The seasonal clothing, stored in wooden chests throughout our samurai's home, tells the story of a life lived in careful attention to social protocol and aesthetic appropriateness, with garments selected and maintained according to principles that balance practical necessity with cultural expectation and personal taste. The quality of the fabric, the sophistication of the dyeing and pattern work, and the precision of the tailoring all communicate information about the wearer's social status and cultural education, while the way garments are cared for and stored demonstrates his understanding of the proper treatment of valuable objects and his commitment to maintaining standards of appearance appropriate to his position. Even the choice of which garments to wear on particular occasions represents a form of social communication that can enhance or undermine the wearer's effectiveness in achieving his professional and personal goals. The cooking and eating utensils that our samurai uses for his daily meals, though simple and functional rather than decorative or luxurious, embodied the same aesthetic principles and cultural values that inform more obviously artistic objects. The wooden rice paddle, polished smooth by years of use and maintained with the same care given to more obviously valuable possessions, represents the traditional Japanese approach to functional design that finds beauty in utility and meaning in the careful performance of everyday tasks. The ceramic dishes and bowls that hold his food, cues chosen for their appropriate scale and seasonal suitability rather than their cost or rarity, to demonstrate the democratic nature of Japanese aesthetic culture, where beauty and meaning are accessible to people of modest means who understand and appreciate the principles that govern traditional approaches to daily life. The lighting devices that illuminate our samurai's evening activities, from the simple oil lamps that provide steady light for reading and writing to the portable lanterns that guide his movements through darkened streets, present the intersection of practical necessity and aesthetic choice that characterizes much of Japanese material culture. The design of lamp holders and lantern frames often incorporates decorative elements that transform utilitarian objects into expressions of artistic sensibility, while the quality of construction and attention to detail demonstrate the maker's commitment to excellence, even in objects intended for purely practical use. The way these lighting devices are used, maintained, and stored reflects the user's understanding of proper household management and his appreciation for the aesthetic dimensions of daily life that distinguish cultured individuals from those who approach their material environment with purely functional concerns. Beyond the modest paper screens and carefully counted rice grains that define our samurai's daily existence lies another world entirely, one where space itself becomes a luxury and emptiness transforms into the ultimate expression of refined taste and political power. It's the great mansions of the daimyo that dot the landscape of Edo like islands of rarefied culture represent not merely wealth or status, but a completely different understanding of how human beings might inhabit space and organize their relationship to the natural world. These vast compounds, with their sweeping gardens, multiple buildings, and armies of specialized servants, create environments so removed from ordinary experience that they might as well exist in a different realm. Yet, they remain intimately connected to the humble, administrative work that occupies our protagonists' morning hours through the complex web of obligation, ceremony, and carefully managed relationships that define the Tokugawa social order. The approach to these mansions begins long before one reaches their imposing gates, as the very neighborhoods that surround them reflect the gravitational pull of wealth and power that shapes the urban landscape according to principles of hierarchy and proximity. The streets grow wider and cleaner as one moves toward the districts where the great lords maintain their Edo residences. The architecture becomes more imposing and carefully maintained, and even the quality of light seems different, filtered through the branches of ancient trees that have been preserved, decaying, and cultivated for generations as living symbols of continuity and natural harmony. The walls that separate these compounds from the common streets rise higher and display more sophisticated construction techniques than those found in ordinary neighborhoods. Their surfaces finished with plaster and tile work that demonstrates both the resources available to their owners and the skilled craftsmanship that such resources can command. The gates themselves function as theatrical stages where the drama of social hierarchy plays out in carefully choreographed encounters between visitors of varying rank and importance. Each arrival and departure managed according to protocols so complex and nuanced that they require specialized knowledge and years of experience to navigate successfully. The size and ornamentation of the gates correspond to the status of their owners within the complex ranking system that governs daimyo relationships. while the number and arrangement of guardhouses, the uniforms and bearing of the gatekeepers, and even the materials used in construction all communicate information about the political and economic position of the household they protect, the rituals of arrival and departure. From the formal presentation of credentials to the elaborate courtesies exchanged between visitors and hosts, create opportunities for the display of cultural refinement and social awareness that can enhance or damage reputations and influence future relationships. The gardens that spread beyond these imposing entrances represent perhaps the most sophisticated expression of the Japanese aesthetic principle that finds profound meaning in the careful arrangement of seemingly simple natural elements. These spaces, designed and maintained by master gardeners whose knowledge encompasses not only horticulture and landscape architecture, but also philosophy, poetry, and the subtle arts of seasonal arrangement, create environments that function simultaneously as works of art, spiritual retreats, and stages for the social interactions that define elite culture. The famous rock gardens, with their raked gravel and carefully positioned stones, achieve effects of extraordinary beauty and contemplative power through the most minimal means, demonstrating the aesthetic philosophy that values suggestion over air, representation and emptiness over abundance as expressions of the highest refinement. The seasonal transformations of these gardens create constantly changing environments that reflect both the natural cycles of growth and decay and the cultural traditions that connect human activity to the broader patterns of cosmic change and renewal. The careful selection and placement of trees and flowering plants ensures that each season brings its own particular beauty and symbolic meaning, from the delicate cherry blossoms that announce spring's arrival to the brilliant autumn maples that remind viewers of the transient nature of earthly pleasure and the Buddhist teaching that permanence underlies all experience. The maintenance of these seasonal effects requires not only horticultural expertise, but also deep cultural knowledge about the symbolic associations of different plants and their proper use in creating compositions that enhance meditation and social interaction while respecting traditional principles of aesthetic harmony. The tea houses that dot these extensive gardens serve as venues for the most refined expressions of Japanese cultural tradition. Their simple exteriors concealing interiors that have been designed and furnished according to principles so sophisticated that they represent the culmination of centuries of aesthetic development and spiritual practice. The famous tea ceremony masters who served the great daimyo families have elevated the simple act of preparing and sharing tea into a complex art form that encompasses architecture, garden design, ceramic arts, calligraphy, flower arrangement, and the subtle psychology of human interaction in ways that transform practical activity into spiritual practice and social gathering into artistic performance. The guests who participate in these ceremonies must possess not only the technical knowledge required to perform their roles properly, but also the cultural sensitivity and spiritual preparation that allow them to appreciate the deeper meanings embedded in every gesture and arrangement. The residential buildings that house the daimyo, its families, and their extensive household staffs represent architectural achievements that balance the competing demands of comfort, security, aesthetic beauty, and social function in ways that demonstrate both the resources available to the elite and the sophisticated understanding of spatial design that characterizes traditional Japanese architecture at its finest. The use of sliding panels and removable partitions creates flexible interior spaces that can be reconfigured according to the changing needs of daily life and ceremonial occasions, while the integration of interior and exterior spaces through carefully positioned openings and garden views creates environments that maintain connection to the natural world while providing the privacy and security that elite families require. The quality of materials and craftsmanship evident in these buildings, from the perfectly fitted wooden joints to the delicate paintings that decorate interior screens, demonstrates the economic resources and cultural sophistication that distinguish the highest levels of Tokugawa society, the entertainment and cultural activities that occupy much of the leisure time available to daimyo families create opportunities for artistic expression and intellectual development that demonstrate both the privileges and responsibilities associated with their elevated social position, the private concerts of traditional music, the poetry competitions that celebrate seasonal changes and classical literary traditions, and the scholarly discussions that explore philosophical and political questions all require not only personal cultivation and education, but also the resources and social connections necessary to attract and support the artists, scholars, and cultural specialists whose participation makes such activities possible. These cultural pursuits serve multiple functions beyond immediate entertainment, creating networks of obligation and influence that extend throughout the elite social structure while providing venues for the informal negotiations and relationship building that support the political and economic activities of the Tokugawa state. The relationship between these elite households, the broader society that supports their existence, remains carefully managed through systems of obligation, ceremony, and controlled interaction that ensure their continued privilege while preventing the kind of isolation that might lead to political instability or social resentment. The public ceremonies and festivals that mark important occasions provide opportunities for displays of generosity and cultural leadership that demonstrate the elite's commitment to community welfare while reinforcing the legitimacy of their privileged positions. The employment of large numbers of servants and specialists creates economic benefits that extend throughout the urban economy, while the patronage of artists and craftsmen supports cultural activities that enrich the broader society, even as they primarily serve elite interests and preferences. Within the rarefied atmosphere of the great daimyo mansions, our lower-ranking samurai occasionally finds himself serving as witness to a form of human interaction so refined and codified that it transcends ordinary social behavior to become something approaching performance art, where every gesture carries weight and every silence speaks volumes about the delicate balance of power, respect, and mutual obligation that holds Tokugawa society together. These encounters, whether as a minor official present at formal ceremonies or as an administrative assistant managing the paperwork that surrounds elite social interactions, provide him with glimpses into a world where the mastery of protocol becomes the ultimate expression of cultural sophistication and political intelligence. The elaborate rituals of greeting, gift, giving, and formal conversation that characterize elite social interaction require years of study and practice to master, creating a specialized form of knowledge that serves as both barrier and bridge between different levels of the social hierarchy. The preparation for these formal encounters begins hours or even days in advance, as household staffs work to ensure that every detail of arrangement, presentation, and timing reflects both the status of the participants and the specific nature of the occasion being celebrated or business being conducted. The selection of appropriate clothing, accessories, ceremonial objects requires deep knowledge of seasonal appropriateness, historical precedent, and the subtle messages that different choices communicate about the wearer's understanding of his position within the complex web of relationships that defines elite society. The arrangement of interior spaces, from the positioning of seating cushions to the selection of decorative scrolls and flower arrangements, creates environments that enhance the dignity and effectiveness of formal interactions while demonstrating the host's cultural refinement and attention to proper procedure. The actual conduct of these formal meetings follows patterns so precisely defined that they approach the level of theatrical performance, with each participant playing roles that have been refined through generations of practice and cultural development. The timing of arrivals, the sequence of greetings and introductions, and the progression of conversational topics all follow established conventions that allow complex negotiations and relationship building to occur within frameworks that minimize the possibility of misunderstanding or accidental offense. The language used in these interactions employs levels of honorific expression and ceremonial formality that transform ordinary conversation into artistic expression, where the choice of words and the rhythm of speech become forms of aesthetic appreciation as well as practical communication. The gift-giving rituals that accompany many of these formal encounters represent perhaps the most sophisticated expression of the principle that material objects can carry meanings far beyond their immediate, practical, or monetary value. The selection of appropriate gifts requires not only knowledge of the recipient's interests and circumstances, but also understanding of the symbolic messages that different objects communicate about the relationship between giver and receiver, the occasion being celebrated, and the future interactions that the gift is intended to encourage or commemorate. The presentation of gifts follows elaborate protocols that govern everything from the wrapping materials and decorative elements to the timing and manner of presentation. Creating ceremonies that transform the simple act of giving into complex expressions of respect, obligation, social connection. The seasonal nature of many elite social interactions creates calendars of formal events that provide structure and meaning to the social year while offering opportunities for the display of cultural knowledge and aesthetic sensitivity that distinguish the truly sophisticated from those who merely possess wealth or hereditary status. The cherry blossom viewing parties that mark spring's arrival, the moon viewing ceremonies that celebrate autumn's beauty, and the year-end gatherings that reflect on the passage of time all require specific forms of preparation, dress, and behavior that demonstrate participants' understanding of traditional cultural values and their ability to find meaning and beauty in the natural cycles that govern human experience. These seasonal celebrations often involve the composition and sharing of poetry, the arrangement of flowers, and the preparation of special foods that connect contemporary social interaction to centuries of cultural tradition and aesthetic development. The documentation and record-keeping that surround these elite social interactions create administrative challenges that require the specialized knowledge and diplomatic skills that our samurai has developed through years of government service. The formal invitations that must be written and delivered according to precise protocols. The guest lists that must be compiled with careful attention to status and precedence. And the thank you notes and follow-up correspondence that maintain relationships after formal events all require mastery of written communication styles that combine aesthetic beauty with practical effectiveness. The maintenance of social calendars, gift records, canned correspondence files creates administrative systems that rival in complexity the governmental bureaucracies that manage official business, demonstrating the sophisticated organizational skills required to maintain the social networks that support elite culture and political activity. The training and preparation required for servants who participate in these elite social functions create educational opportunities that demonstrate both the complexity of traditional Japanese culture and the democratic ideals that allow individuals from modest backgrounds to achieve mastery and recognition through dedicated study and practice. The head servants who coordinate major social events often possess knowledge and skills that rival those of their employers in sophistication and cultural depth. While their ability to manage complex logistics and interpersonal dynamics makes them invaluable assets whose expertise is recognized and valued throughout elite society. These positions provide pathways for advancement and cultural participation that transcend the limitations of hereditary status while remaining within the framework of service that characterizes Tokugawa social organization. As evening shadows lengthen across the carefully raked gravel of distant daimyo gardens, and our samurai prepares for the quiet rituals that will conclude his methodical day. His thoughts turn to the profound distance that separates his world of measured portions and careful calculations from the realm of unlimited space and refined emptiness that defines elite existence in Tokugawa, Japan. This distance is not merely economic or social, but represents a fundamental difference in how human beings can inhabit time and space, pursue meaning and beauty, and relate to the natural and cultural world that surrounds them. The contrast between his modest quarters, where every object serves multiple purposes and every expenditure requires careful justification, and the vast mansions, where emptiness itself becomes a luxury and silence transforms into an art form, illuminates the extraordinary range of human experience that the Tokugawa system has created and sustained through its sophisticated mechanisms of social control and cultural organization. The perspective that our samurai gains through his occasional administrative contact with elite households provides him with insights into the nature of power and privilege that few people in his position have the opportunity to observe and understand. His presence at formal ceremonies as a minor official, his management of correspondence between government offices and daimyo households, and his processing of documents related to the Senkinkari system all create windows into a world that operates according to principles and priorities that seem almost alien when viewed from the practical constraints and immediate concerns that define his daily existence. Yet these glimpses also reveal the underlying humanity and complexity that characterize even the most privileged members of Tokugawa society. He observes the careful attention to detail, the constant awareness of obligation in relationship, and the subtle anxieties that accompany positions of great responsibility and public visibility. The cultural distance between his world, and that of the elite proves even more profound than the economic differences, as the gap between his evening tea ceremony performed with simple ceramic bowls and the elaborate seasonal tea gatherings held in purpose-built pavilions within meticulously designed gardens represents not merely a difference in resources, but a completely different understanding of how aesthetic experience can be integrated into daily life. His appreciation for the beauty of his modest surroundings, the satisfaction he finds in the precise performance of routine tasks, and the meaning he discovers in the careful maintenance of tradition within constrained circumstances, all reflect the same fundamental aesthetic principles and spiritual values that inform elite culture. Yet the practical expressions of these values differ so dramatically that they might seem to belong to entirely different civilizations rather than different levels of the same society. The time and space available to elite households for cultural pursuits and aesthetic development create possibilities for human flourishing, that remain largely theoretical for people in his position, who must find meaning and beauty within the narrow margins left by the demanding requirements of professional survival and family obligation. The weeks that elite households can devote to preparing for a single tea ceremony, the months of planning that precede major social events, and the years of study that enable mastery of traditional arts all represent luxuries of time and attention that people like our samurai can only imagine while pursuing their own more modest forms of cultural engagement within the constraints imposed by their economic and social circumstances. Yet, the observations he makes during his brief contacts with elite culture provide him with models and aspirations that enrich his understanding of what human life might become under different circumstances, while helping him appreciate the real achievements possible within his own situation. The political implications of these vast differences in lifestyle and opportunity create tensions that the Tokugawa system must constantly manage through its sophisticated mechanisms of social control and cultural integration, ensuring that awareness of inequality does not lead to resentment or instability, while maintaining the motivation and loyalty of people throughout the social hierarchy. The elaborate ideologies of social harmony and mutual obligation that justify and explain these differences require constant reinforcement through education, ceremony, and the practical demonstration that each level of society receives appropriate recognition and support for his contributions to the common good. Our samurai's acceptance of his position and his dedication to the proper performance of his duties reflect the success of these ideological systems. Yet, his observations of elite life also plant seeds of awareness about alternative possibilities that could, under different circumstances, grow into desires for change or improvement that might challenge the stability of the existing order. The administrative machinery that our samurai helps to operate serves crucial functions in managing these potential tensions by creating systems of advancement and recognition that provide hope and motivation for people at every level of the social hierarchy, while maintaining the essential boundaries that preserve stability and prevent the kind of mobility that might threaten established relationships and traditional authority. The careful gradations of rank and responsibility within the bureaucratic system, the opportunities for recognition and modest advancement based on demonstrated competence and loyalty, and the cultural ideals that find dignity and meaning in faithful service, all combine to create frameworks within which people like our protagonists can pursue satisfying and meaningful careers while remaining within appropriate social boundaries. The evening rituals that conclude our samurai's day take on additional poignancy when viewed against the backdrop of the elaborate entertainments and cultural activities that mark the conclusion of elite social gatherings, as his simple tea ceremony and quiet reading represent personal versions of the same fundamental human needs for beauty, reflection, and spiritual nourishment that motivate the most sophisticated expressions of aristocratic culture. The candle that lights his evening study, the book of poetry that provides his entertainment, in the quiet satisfaction he finds in reviewing the day's accomplishments, all demonstrate that the capacity for aesthetic appreciation and meaningful existence does not depend entirely upon external resources, but can be cultivated and expressed within even the most constrained circumstances through attention, discipline, and a proper understanding of traditional values. The social distance that separates his evening solitude from the elaborate dinner parties and cultural performances that enliven elite households reflects not only differences in wealth and status, but also fundamentally different approaches to the relationship between individual experience and social interaction. As his contemplative evening routine emphasizes, personal reflection and private study, while elite entertainment focuses on shared aesthetic experience and the complex social negotiations that maintain relationships and advance political interests. Both approaches to evening leisure serve important functions in maintaining the cultural vitality and social stability of Tokugawa society. Yet, they create very different forms of human experience and very different understandings of how individual fulfillment relates to social responsibility and community participation. The dreams and aspirations that fill our samurai's quiet evening hours reflect both his acceptance of his current position and his awareness of possibilities that extend beyond his immediate circumstances. As his reading exposes him to stories of advancement and achievement, while his practical experience teaches him the importance of finding satisfaction within realistic limitations and appreciating the genuine opportunities for growth and contribution that his position provides. The balance between ambition and contentment that he must maintain in order to preserve his effectiveness and happiness demonstrates the psychological sophistication required for successful adaptation to the constraints and opportunities of Tokugawa social organization, while his ability to find meaning and beauty in modest circumstances provides a model for the kind of character development that the system rewards and encourages. The contrast between his evening solitude and the elaborate social gatherings that conclude elite days serves as a final reminder of the extraordinary range of human experience that the Tokugawa system encompasses and manages, from the most modest forms of individual contemplation to the most sophisticated expressions of collective cultural achievement. As he prepares for sleep in his simple quarters, surrounded by the familiar objects that define his modest but dignified existence, The distant lights of great mansions twinkle like stars in another universe, close enough to observe but distant, enough to remain mysterious, beautiful, and somehow reassuring in their very remoteness. The knowledge that such refinement and beauty exists somewhere within his world, even if beyond his direct reach, enriches his understanding of human possibility, while deepening his appreciation for the genuine achievements and satisfactions available within his own carefully circumscribed, but nevertheless meaningful sphere of action and influence. The gentle sounds that mark the transition from day to night in Edo, the distant temple bells, the soft closing of wooden shutters, the whispered conversations of neighbors preparing for rest, create a symphony that encompasses all levels of society and all degrees of wealth and status, reminding him that beneath the elaborate differences in lifestyle and opportunity that divide Tokugawa society, the fundamental rhythms of human life remain constant and universal. As sleep approaches, in the day's careful distinctions between high and low, rich and poor, powerful and modest begin to dissolve into the democratic realm of dreams and rest. Our samurai finds peace in the knowledge that tomorrow will bring another opportunity to serve with dignity and competence, while pursuing his own modest but authentic version of the cultural ideals and spiritual values that give meaning and purpose to human existence in any age or circumstance.